providing us with a buffet of thoughts to go with today, and also for responding to the multitude of challenges.
Young days also, I lived in villages and bring out the issues that I saw.
I'd like to thank Women's Crisis Centre and UNDP and the Australian Embassy that has facilitated this particular gathering. Rather than keeping it a very formal session, I thought it would be best if I could open up the floor so you could ask questions. I think there is a number of issues that probably at crossroads, in the sense that we have issues pertaining to domestic violence and how youth can help mitigate those risks pertaining to domestic violence and indeed reduce it. But also at the same time, I think given the history of Fiji, no issue can in fact be discussed without taking into consideration our political and our constitutional and indeed socio-economic dynamics that takes place. Because many a times, and I'll give you an example to bring it home to point, I remember a few years ago, this is probably before 2007, probably would have been around about 2005 or so, there was a car that was coming from the EV tree side going up towards Wemanu Road, and then it turned right into what we know is Super Central going to Reserve Bank of Fiji. And as the car took a hard right, the door opened and a baby fell out of the car. And you know, everybody standing around that intersection was quite shocked, and I happened to be there also. And this lady came up to me and immediately grabbed my arm and said, "Was it an Indian baby or Fijian baby? Was it an Indian baby or a Fijian baby?" So you see, her level or her ability to identify or her ability to feel some sort of remorse at that particular incident was dependent on the ethnicity of the child. And that is a fact. That is a fact, and that is in fact what I would call a stigma that is in Fiji. It's not just only pertaining to ethnicity, of course. It has to do with religion, it has to do with province, it has to do with the socio-economic status. And unfortunately, that is what we have in Fiji. So my point being that many a times in Fiji, when you have a particular issue, when you have a particular matter that cuts across society, we tend to have a different type of reception depending on extraneous factors and how we use those extraneous factors to analyze a matter of national importance. That is a very critical issue. We need to think about that. I remember a few years ago also, when there was the family law bill that was before the Standing Committee on Law and Justice under the previous government during the SDL days. The committee, I think, Shamima will correct me, took about 2 years to, in fact, go around Fiji and have a look at to get people's comments on the family law bill. Unfortunately, again, there were some compromises made in that family law bill. So, for example, the powers that be at the end of the day decided that de facto relationships would not be recognized. And as you know, in Fiji, de facto relationships are a reality. You know, there's a bit of a saying, people say people have more than one kitchen, or there are many people who live in de facto relationships. They live as husband and wife, but they're not married per se under the civil law. So de facto relationships went out the window as far as family law bill is concerned. Today in Fiji, a few years ago, we had amended the family law bill. De facto relationships are recognized, where you have spousal maintenance being paid for people in de facto relationships. So I think we see, when we want to discuss the issue of domestic violence, when we want to discuss the issue of housing, when you want to discuss the issue of poverty, when you want to discuss the issue of accessibility to telecommunications, accessibility to transportation, all of these issues, accessibility of disabled persons to various services, whether your footpaths are, wheelchair friendly or not, whether your transportation systems are wheelchair friendly or not, I was with this gentleman on Saturday at the Lotoka Special School, where the school over there had invited people from Suva to have a sign language course. And in fact, I was in the minority. I mean, this gentleman will tell you he's a graduate at USP. He'll be graduating this year in IT. But the fact is that when the time came to clap, people receiving the certificates, I was the only one doing this. Everybody else was doing this. So you see, it does go to show that our world, the formation of our world, the formation of where we are, depends on how we view the world. And that is very, very critical to understand. So I'm saying, if you have this one-day gathering, if you are able to look at, for example, what some people call the epistemological basis of language, epistemological basis of your reasoning, why do you think that? If you be able to be critical about it, that I think in itself would be a huge achievement.